We should be now recording, and I must apologise. I am about to do quite a bit of reading off my phone. I was drafted in as a last-minute host for this, and I have apologised to our hosts that I don't know their biographies off by heart, but I'm going to just lead in with those and we will get started as quickly as possible. The session today is an hour and there will be an opportunity for Q&A after the main discussion. So, Pride 365, Pride not just for June. Less than a month from now, LinkedIn will be awash with rainbow colours and bold statements about LGBTQ+ inclusion. We have come to expect that every June, and many of us will wonder just how authentic it is. Inclusion means just that, including every day, not just 1 month every year. Organisations can strive to be inclusive 365 days a year, and we as individuals can be allies every day. That's why it's fantastic to have Pride 365 here today talking about exactly that. I am delighted to be joined by the CEO of Pride 365, Mizel, and two Pride 365 champions, Jacqui, Gavin and Adrian-Trett. Adrian is an EDI consultant, a global expert and non-binary sports activist and politician. He is an accomplished leader in the global DE&I field and is a Pride 365 champion and Liberal Democrat, speaking in various roles for the party for Liberal International on LGBTQ+ rights. Adrian previously worked for 5 years at ENEI as Global Relationship Manager before moving to Anglo American as their Global Inclusion and Diversity Advisor. They now lead their own consultancy specialising in non-binary education, rights and acceptance, with their heart fully immersed in finding inclusive solutions for every organisation. And I'm absolutely going to add to that Adrian is currently in Copenhagen for Eurovision, which is making me incredibly jealous. So thank you very much, Adrian, for joining us today. Jack Mizel is Chief Executive Officer of Pride 365. Jack has worked within the sales and marketing industry for over 30 years. You don't look old enough, Jack. Within the publishing, sponsorship and certification sectors. Jack is a proven business leader, both in terms of growing businesses and people development. He built Profile Pursuit, a transatlantic publishing company, from the kitchen table to a PLC. During this time, Jack developed his affinity and allyship within the LGBTQ+ community, as Profile Pursuit were practitioners of authentic inclusion years before it was considered important. For the last 5 years, Jack, as the founder and CEO of Pride 365, has brought his passions of enhancing people's life and marketing skills together. And last but by no means least, Jacqui, Gavin, BEM. Director, 5 Senses of Inclusion, a trading name of Oak Polytech Limited, Jacqui was awarded the British Empire Medal for services in gender equality and is an acclaimed global leader in diversity and inclusion. With a rich tapestry of achievements and a sterling career, Jacqui has a benchmark in transforming organisational cultures and fostering inclusive environments. Her professional journey, highlighted by leading roles in prestigious organisations such as Britvic plc, British Volt and the Cabinet Office, epitomises her unwavering commitment to equality, diversity and well-being. So we have a team of real expert and passionate advocates today in the room, and it really is a pleasure to be joined by all 3 of you, so thank you. And Jack, I will hand over to you to get the conversation started.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I've been very much looking forward to this opportunity of speaking with you all and really talking about the things that bring us together, rather than, as we look at the newspapers or our TV screens every day, things that supposedly divide us. Everything that all 3 of us stand for is true inclusion. So people talk about diversity and inclusion and looking at protected characteristics, but ultimately the thing that really matters to us all as a world, as business leaders, as friends, as a society, is looking at the things that bring us together and our common humanity. So Pride 365, in a nutshell, is a certification and marketing organization that exists because we believe that the support for the LGBT+ community needs to be 365 days a year. It's the antithesis of virtue signaling. It's the antithesis of being a fair weather friend. What all of our partners have in common, and these are very big companies and indeed much smaller ones, Hilton, Nissan, to name but two, is that none of us believe that you can ever be perfect from a DE&I perspective. Human beings are far too complex to get everything right all of the time. But what we do believe is that it's a journey of incremental improvements that we commit to and make every day. And the final point I'd like to make is that I'm a huge advocate and passionate fan and supporter of Pride, Pride events, and Pride Month, and indeed attend many of them as an ally. And it's critical that that kind of both protest and celebration are witnessed. They bring people together, but we must remember that when June finishes, it's perfectly possible, and in fact, I'm sure advisable, that if you're gay in June, you're probably going to be gay in September. So what we'd like to talk about today, and I'm sure Adrian and Jacqui will add something further to this, is the importance of authentic support for the community all year round. Jacqui, do you want to pick up the mantle? In fact, it should be Adrian. Adrian, you're the athlete amongst us. You should pick up the baton.
I'll go first for the relay point for you there, Jack.
Yes.
Absolutely. For me, the authentic, visible supporting of Pride throughout the year is one of the key concepts around having inclusive employee resource groups in organisations. And therefore not just bringing out a tick box that Pride happens and they do something and that's the end of it for the rest of the year. That's why Pride 365 is so important, because it means that the journey continues every month of the year, every day of the year. Because actually we don't change at any points during those years. We need to be able to be visible all the time. And people need to be able to ask questions all the time and to learn all the time. So just doing it for one block and then forgetting it for the rest of the year is not acceptable. And unfortunately, I think we, all three of us on the call here, Jack, myself and Jacqui, can all experience or express times where perhaps organisations that we've worked with or been part of have seen it as a tick box exercise and ultimately haven't succeeded in actually bringing to the fore the need for inclusive, visible, authentic communications throughout all the year.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, to build on that as well, I would say that I could make it easy just by saying ditto to exactly what Jack and Adrian had said, but rather than making it that simple, let's go into more detail. So when Jack and myself and Adrian and a few others sat down and talked about Pride 365 and why Pride 365, as well as recognizing that this is a 365-day a year, or in this case, 366-day a year operation, it's also about the importance that allies bring. Allies are hugely important, and I have to give huge credit to the man himself in terms of Jack, that the way he's driven this agenda through the eyes of an allyship, because picking up on what you were saying, Jack, about how do we bring us together rather than that segregation is so important. And it's the one thing that I have to say about Pride 365 is we want to look at this through everybody's lens, because I know if I look at the audience out there, there's probably people out there feeling a little bit frightened to talk about this subject right now. So how do we create that safe spaces? How do we create that opportunities for anybody who's anybody not being frightened in any way, shape or form? And that's been a real blessing that I've had when working with Jack, to be able to really allow us to create this initiative that makes this much more than just about the LGBT flag or celebrating Pride Month. It's much more about recognizing that we live this life 365 days a year. We don't, as you say, Jack, wake up tomorrow and say, oh, by the way, it's something that is within us. So this is the real drive that I have to say. So thank you very much, Jack, is what I want to say to you for everything that you're doing in this space.
I think that if you boil down to its purest essence, the thing that separates Pride 365 from any other organization is that, again, even putting aside the fact we don't believe in indices and perfection, it's that if you look at most organizations and how they view diversity, equity, and inclusion, they will set great store in producing ERG, so employment resource groups in different protected areas. So there's the LGBT one, there's the women's one, there's the Black Lives Matter one. And again, having a safe space, let's say, for these organizations is critical. However, if you keep people in silos, how on earth are we going to bring people together and actually understand our common humanity? So where Pride 365 set enormous store is actually building ally networks where the LGBT community, and for want of a better word, the straight or heteronormative community, actually come together and realize, you know what, we all have, unfortunately not enough, Tottenham Hotspur in common, or Gloria Gaynor in common, or even I, as someone who is slightly right of centre, Adrian and I have enormous amounts of liberal social policies in common. Jacqui and I have football and many other things in common. But by bringing people together, we focus on the things that we care about each other, or love about each other, or learn about each other. And it's only by doing that that someone can actually really be their authentic self at work. I mean, it's impossible unless you have true understanding, shared experience, warmth, camaraderie, and that can only come from conversation, dialogue. And it's not always easy, but it can be done. So, for example, with our work with Nissan, you can imagine that building an LGBT ERG within an office in leafy Maple Cross is one thing, but building an ERG and an ally network at the factory at Sunderland is somewhat more complex. But nonetheless, with a will and a genuine commitment to do things better every day, it can be done. So rather than having a coffee morning, let's have a joint darts team or a pool team. It's an opportunity for people to come together. And why are we doing this? Well, one, it's better for society. And two, every business where people can turn up and be there, again, it's almost become a cliche, but for me, it's so important, but where everyone can turn up and just be cool in their own skin, be their authentic selves, those businesses flourish. But it can't be a tick box exercise. It can't be something that HR say, well, you know, I've done that and I've done that and I've done that, because you cannot policy and procedure your way to happiness. That can only come through culture. And so culture, not quotas, that's the key in my view.
I probably could add on to that slightly, Jack, in terms of the cultural expression of different groups, but interlinking those groups together. And I think that's one of the really key aspects of the employee resourcing groups in terms of their intersectionality. Okay. We don't all fit into one group. I mean, I could think of probably 7 or 8 different groups I could think of just regarding our protective characteristics, let alone football interests, dancing interests, golf interests, powerlifting, whatever you want to throw at me. You all have different elements to your life that you want to bring together. And the only way of bringing all those things together is by having that congenial grouping of finding interesting things about people, to learn about people, and to learn about their different protected characteristics at the same time. So it's not a tick box exercise, but it's at the same time culturally learning about different people and how are they made up? What are their backgrounds, their experience, their likes, their sporting activities, whatever it might be.
Yes.
And that way you get a much more rounded view of a person, rather than just thinking they fit into a particular ERG that might be LGBT, or it might be one for ethnic minorities, or it might be a disability one. Having some way of grouping them all coming together is part of the work that I do in terms of my non-inclusion, non-binary inclusion consultancy work, is trying to come up with different solutions to find the most amenable, authentic way to bring people together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that Jacqui and I are actually working on currently is that within the public sector, and indeed Adrian, but within the public sector, they often do assessments, and you'll tell me what the term is in a second, Jacqui, but they'll do assessments on how effective the diversity training that they have done and how it's been inculcated within an organization. And that's great because it's easy to check and, oh yeah, no, we've done that. But what isn't being done, and is going to be, in fact, the next significant part of our development as an organization working with partners, is to assess inclusion, but in the same way. So what is the true lived experience of people within a workplace? Are they truly valued and respected for who they are, as well as their contribution, of course, to the organization? So, I mean, the thing about Pride 365, and thank God, is that we are completely apolitical. We are non-divisive. Our entire mantra is looking at the things that bring us together, not at the things that supposedly are different about us. And if only that was true of the wider society, we would all be, I mean, we'd all be better off. But Jacqui, would you like to speak a little bit about the inclusion piece as opposed to, and its importance rather than diversity?
Sure, Jack. So the thing that Jack was alluding to, and it may be something that many people have actually heard about as well, because I know that this has moved into private sector as well as third sector and any other sector as well. But if I was to say the term equality impact assessment, we know that an equality impact assessment is something that allows you to look at things through the lens of the 9 protected characteristics as laid out in the Equality Act, to say, have we made due consideration for each person based on those protected characteristics, which at the time when the Equality Act was introduced was exactly the right thing to do, to allow us to be able to better understand the various different experiences as covered by those impact assessments, which allowed for policy change, allowed for process change. But I think we've got to that point in society after, well, nearly 20 years since the Equality Act was first originally bandied around Parliament and then obviously became legislation in 2010. We're now moving into that area in exactly the same kind of conversation that we've just been having around creating something what we want to call an inclusion impact assessment tool, which looks at this much more through the cultural lens, looks at it much through how do we absolutely get everybody to feel connected? Because at the end of the day, most people are looking to come to an organization and create that sense of belonging. And that's what we want to try and do with this new part of the addition that Jack was alluding to really, really help organizations go beyond just the protected characteristics. Because again, looking at the culture wars that are going on, it's that sort of them and us. And most people in the middle are going, well, you mean to say I have to choose either go that way or that way? And I don't want to go either way. I'm quite happy, but I'm a little bit frightened to talk about it. So with this inclusion impact assessment tool, we hope that this will look at the lens through every kind of context about what it means to be who you are as a human being. And I think that's really, really important in this next step as we evolve, rather than go through the revolution, as I talk about it, of what equality is about, into more the evolution stage about what it means to be a human being in a world that outside that window right now is a little bit scary, a little bit frightened for many people.
And again, I mean, picking up on that, we're living in a world and at a time where people are terrified of saying anything for fear of being cancelled. if you say anything that is remotely contentious or against the direction of travel, I mean, the thought of being cancelled, people are just saying nothing. And that doesn't mean the problem's gone away. It means it's becoming more deep-rooted. And it's only by bringing issues into the light and actually talking about them. See, our view is you can't actually ask a bad question as long as it's asked from a position of genuine respect and a desire to learn more. So again, Pride 365 work with our partners to organize conversations. I mean, who knew? Who knew the importance of conversations? But dialogue, conversation between people, so that anything that is niggling either party can be addressed and discussed, brought into the light and dealt with. You can't deal with things that you can't see. And in fact, one of the reasons Pride is so wonderful, and we will march again at Pride London this year with our partners, is that millions of people come and celebrate the kind of joyous nature of the community, as well as respect the struggle that it's taken over 50 plus years to actually get to this place. And so that visibility and bringing things into the light are critical, and Pride acts as a beacon for that. The only reason we're called Pride 365, other than I quite like the name, is that Pride is at the central point, and it has to be every day of the year. As I said, you can't be a fair weather friend to anyone. And I don't mean this in any kind of let's sit around a campfire with our banjos singing Kumbaya. I mean, if you want to run a successful business and you want to get the best out of your staff, then respect, dignity, bringing people together is, well, it's just common sense. And indeed, when you consider that 17% of the population of the West are going to identify as somewhere on the LGBT plus continuum by 2030, and they want to work for and indeed spend their money with organizations that are cool in this space, it's actually a business imperative as well as the right thing to do. It's one of those wonderful things where doing the right thing and the most profitable thing are the same thing, as long as you do it in an apolitical, non-divisive, collegiate, and harmonious way. No one wants to have a finger pointed at them and say, how dare you not agree with me because I'm right and you're wrong. I mean, Jacqui, Adrian, and I will have disagreements on some stuff, and that's all right. Who knew you could disagree with each other and still be friends who care about each other? And it doesn't lead to hate and vitriol, or, I mean, I wouldn't know how to cancel someone if it landed on my head, but nonetheless, or canceling someone. I mean, it's ridiculous. So if there's anything that I believe in, it's that you bring people together and you invite them in, you don't call them out.
Couldn't agree.
Go on, Adrian, sorry.
Couldn't agree with you more, Jack. And it's, for me, it's always a space to learn, a space to educate, and a space to hear different people's views. And as long as the views are expressed in a way where someone can even disagree, and as you said, Jacqui, myself disagree on things, but we do so in a respectful, collegiate, learning way, in which our experiences as individuals are all different. None of us have had the same life experience.
No.
And therefore, how we express that life experience does affect what we believe in and what values and passions we have. But as long as the conversation remains respectful and understanding, and even if at the end of the day you still agree to disagree on something, that's absolutely fine. It's the manner in which you do that. And that's the problem at the moment in society, is that unfortunately we are at a point where two sides can't have a conversation without having disagreement, but disagreement that becomes hate. And that's the line for where I draw. And that is a really serious issue that we need to try and change through Pride 365 in order for people to have these complex, difficult conversations, but in a manner that's respectful and inclusive of everyone.
Adrian, on that point, and if I may, there's a nuanced point that I'd like to make, which is this. Even the language around discourse or argument is binary, winning, losing. I've won an argument, I've lost an argument. And of course, that's plainly nonsensical. Even if two people have a conversation and don't ultimately reach accord on the main point, the fact that they've had an opportunity of having a discussion and explaining their perspective, why it's their perspective, and why they've reached that position, and both people are given the time and the space to do it, what happens is that you may not fundamentally agree on the conclusion, but you've understood the journey that's got that person to their position.
Yeah.
And that is really where you start developing understanding and empathy. It's not one other. It's not 1, 2, yes, no, win, lose. It's about truly respecting how someone has reached their position, why they've reached it, and then you actually really do bring people, again, forgive me for repeating this, together. There shouldn't be sides to any of this, to any diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It's the art of debate that we're talking about here. I think the art of debate over the last, for argument's sake, 8 years has dissipated, and we need to find a way to bring it back to that opportunity. Exactly what you were saying, Adrian, about yes, we will have disagreements, but at the end of the day, we will still acknowledge each other. To use your language, Jack, we still love, respect, etc., etc. Those are so important. The fact that you can walk away from a debate and still acknowledge the existence of the other party is so, so important. Whereas the culture wars that we're seeing is so divisive. It's creating the society that we're living in, that we're all frightened to get up and go out and face on a day-to-day terms. And we know that mental health is a huge, huge thing right now. So let's find a way to go beyond just having a soapbox on social media. Find a way to absolutely have this kind of conversation. I mean, the three of us could be on a conversation. Adrian can say something about Chelsea and I'll completely disagree. And then Jack will say something about Spurs and I'll completely disagree about that. But we won't talk about Manchester United, okay? But
I wouldn't mind.
Not after last. Not after last night.
I wouldn't mind at all. We've got 20 minutes left. We can use it well, Jacqui.
But I'll bring in my Scottish side as well, which is Aberdeen, which is good. We're in the northeast of Scotland anyway. But the real drive is absolutely finding a way to be able to realize that we are still human and we will always be together. And that's a real key point, that we need to find a way to bring us back together. And that's the great thing about Pride 365, because Jack, as an ally, said, I want to do something different. And I want to do it for the community that really sometimes is isolated by so many, and bringing so many other facets to that to really make it, at the end of the day, yes, this is about LGBT, but it's much more besides that as well.
Catherine, you kindly mentioned Profile Pursuit, which was the publishing company that I founded all those years ago. And we were the first publishers of Pride, which was a lifestyle publication for the community, as well as helping San Francisco, Washington, London, Chicago Prides secure their first sponsorships. My business partner, Steve, was and is to this day gay. He's been with Roger for 40 years, which in straight years, I don't know, it's like 900 years they've been together. And the point is that we had 60% of our management were gay, 40% of our staff. And for us, we just brought a whole bunch of cool people together that could do their job, because a business is a meritocracy. And I mean, who knew? But we quickly realized that if you treated people just like anyone else with respect and dignity, where previously they hadn't been treated in the same way, that this group of people who are friends to this day were extraordinarily loyal and committed, because we were doing inclusion before it was a thing. You just bring people together and you treat them with respect and dignity, and you can conquer empires. I mean, we literally started on a kitchen table. And because we started thinking, well, let's advertise in the pink paper because no one else was doing it, we brought staff together and we thrived. It became a public company. And all I'm saying is that these same skill sets, which I started all of those years ago, have been honed yet further, enhanced yet further. So we now have a program where we work with partners in 3-year cycles, where we collaboratively work with them to put together a pledge, public-facing pledge of their commitment to making the lives of the community better at work and in the wider society. So what does authentic look like? It is not putting up a rainbow flag on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram during Pride Month and singing, "I will survive if your boss walks past your desk." Believe it or not, even if you sing it word for word, that's not authentic. What is authentic is a genuine commitment to making the lives of staff better and society better every day. And if you do it in incremental bite-sized chunks, and it's agreed, again, collaboratively between our partners and ourselves, it's actually much easier. You don't have to cram all of this effort into the last 4 weeks. I better get something done now because it's June. What am I going to do? Or it's LGBT History Month or Trans Awareness Day. No. These days, these months are important, but what's much more important is, what do you do every day? How does staff feel about being at work every day? Okay. Is it question time now? I've run out of words.
I could honestly listen to the three of you talk all day. I mean, so much of what you've covered resonates with me personally, but also with what we are working towards trying to support our members to do in the Institute of Directors, not just in Scotland, but across the UK and beyond. We do have some questions, which I will move on to, but there was a couple of things that were covered over the course of the conversation that I really just wanted to re-emphasise. I think that culture, not quotas point is absolutely critical, and something that as leaders, our members should be very mindful of. And just that notion of the importance of dialogue and buy-in from the top. Set the example that you want to be within your organisation. And I love that quote, bring people together and invite them in and don't call them out. That for me epitomises the role of good conscientious leadership, and that's exactly what we're about as the Institute of Directors. You know, the wonderful thing about our network being cross-sector, cross-industry, is that we do have so many individuals within it who do want to be allies, who are allies, and every day are out there, you know, demonstrating really good practice. And what's really encouraging is that there's another whole cohort of people who are looking at them as sound case study examples and learning from them. So it's really encouraging. A couple of questions that we have to get the conversation started, but I do know that there's a couple in the box as well, so I will try to facilitate this as best I can. But just a shout out to everybody listening in to please use this time to drop your question in the box, or if you would like to, we're a small enough group, you can raise your hand and we will bring you in to ask your question. I wanted to just ask, we've talked a bit about Pride 365 and what it is. What does it mean to be a Pride 365 champion? What does that look like?
Do you want me to hear first, Jacqui, or you go first this time?
I'll let you go first, Adrian. No problems at all.
Well, I think for me, Pride 365 champion has three key elements to it. One of which is the visibility. It's being out there, it is being part of the community, and it is reflecting the views and sentiments of the organisation that you're representing. And that's really important because the whole name of Pride, that's why I put the top on today, Pride 365, because actually, for me, the visibility and the determination that this is something that means a lot to you personally, and it means a lot to me to be an ambassador, and that's part of the role of being a ambassador for Pride 365, is to fulfil those it's not requirements, but feel that sense of purpose for the role that you do. At the same time, it allows you also the opportunity to speak on behalf and to support Pride 365 development, not only in gaining new businesses, new organisations. I was very fortunate to be at the marathon last year to support the runners for Nissan, and therefore, again, being involved in the activities of the organisation and supporting their development is part of being an ambassador as well. So for me, it has key elements to that. It's authenticity, it's visibility, and it's also enhancing the organisation's reputation in having people who stand very clearly and firmly in public about their views and their passions for inclusion and diversity and equity in life.
Yeah.
I think to build on that as well, I mean, as a champion, it's that commitment to, yes, having the lived experience of being a member of the LGBTQ+ community, but it's also about how we actually make sure that we do the wider diversity throughout the year beyond what is traditionally the typical celebrations and activities around Pride Month. It's about building much more beyond that. So year-round advocacy is a really important thing, to be able to build that importance of maintaining the focus on these issues, not just around Pride Month or Ida Hobbit Day or whichever other day you wish to pick on, but absolutely really building that. It's about creating that visibility. Yes, I'm not exactly a stranger or shy and retiring type in this area, but it absolutely creates that visibility and that representation more beyond just the same people that we see again and again and again, which is, again, really important. It's providing that support and resources. So literally knowing that I don't need to wait till this period of time to be able to do it. And it's also about how we also create that wider community engagement piece, in whether it be the workplace, education pieces, really driving that and getting people on board is so important. And in going back to what I said before, in that safe way, in a way that allows for those conversations, allows for those, I don't get it, I don't understand, what does it mean to be, and really engaging that. So having that wealth of knowledge around the table in terms of the champions that are there, it really helps us get those messages out there to have the widest possible experience around what it means to be X, Y, or Z, or in this case, LGBT+.
Thank you both.
Very well said.
We have a message in the chat from Sarah, and Jack, I'll direct this to you. I don't know if you've kind of read it in the chat box, but in a time when all metrics are measured and funding becomes linked to activity and support, how do you help a business move away from trying to measure success in their engagement with the Equality Act?
Yes, no, again, a great question. And it's not that we don't measure. It's just that we don't believe in perfection, or just locking yourself in a darkened room for 6 months, HR team locking themselves in a darkened room for 6 months, asking questions so they can get a special score. We absolutely do assess where our partners are at the beginning of their journey, and then agree on what those improvements should be over a period of 3 years. So everything that we do, of course, is going to be legally compliant. We're not going off-piste and say, well, let's not worry about the Equalities Act, because, well, you're not really going to get sued, are you? Of course not. We're completely cognizant of the law that we have to adhere to. But again, our focus will always be on where are you now in terms of the culture piece vis-a-vis your staff? Okay, now let's look at what best practice looks like and what can we achieve over the next 1, 2, and 3 years. So we will be able to provide you with real data during the course of the partnership that shows the improvements that you have made, that the lived experience of your staff has got better, that we have, of course, provided value for money. But again, if you're just looking to tick boxes so you and your boss think you're doing a good job, then we're not that partner.
Really good point to make there, Jack.
Can I build on that at all, Catherine? I think building on that point as well, I think it's also, and forgive me sounding like a repeating record as well, but is that culture shift is so important because yes, data is important. And as somebody who's worked in leading organizations across a wide scale, whether it be public, third, et cetera, absolutely, data is really important. But one of the most important things is when somebody wakes up in the morning or even gets to 4:30 on a Sunday evening and think, got to go to work on tomorrow. How are they actually feeling? How do we create that culture that empowers them to absolutely feel that sense of belonging? So that's really important as well. And I think this is one of the great things about Pride 365 is we're trying to be able to get to that point where every single person absolutely feels that sense of belonging to an organization.
I think that's a really interesting point there, Jacqui, because you're absolutely right. Data only will take us so far, and people are only going to be prepared to share so much of their own data depending on how they feel in their organization or where that data is to be shared.
Exactly.
I think that's a really nuanced, valid point there. Just whilst we're given a chance for any more questions to come through, I am quite a visual person, and I kind of jumped upon the Nissan example that you gave earlier on, Jack. I just wondered if you had any more kind of standout case study examples, particularly where allyship was really prevalent, that you could possibly share with us.
Well, I'd like to give a couple of examples. So one, Nissan, we can talk about just the sheer volume of emails and indeed social media responses we get from people in Nissan, including the factory, saying that now 3 years in, they feel that they can be themselves at work. They have mates on the shop floor who they can go out, have a pint with without being fearful of hiding who they are. But if you recall at the beginning of the conversation, I mentioned that Pride 365 is both a certification, but also a marketing business. So we believe good behavior deserves reward, and we work with our partners to help them secure not just great staff, but often sell more of what they have. So one of the examples I love because it shows that our partner is mindful, and we were helping them be mindful of the needs of the community, is the work we do with Hilton. So Hilton, we've all heard of them. They're not short of a room or two, and they obviously want to sell as many of them as they possibly can for as long as they can. So I pointed out to them that 73% of the LGBT+ community has a fur baby, and 63% has more than one. So I said, how cool would it be if we put together a campaign that not only was there a gift for the same-sex couple when they turn up, but also for their furry friend? So we came up with a campaign called Bone Appetit, which is, I mean, just the cutest thing in the world. And it was incredibly successful. And it's not magic. It's using data to understand the needs of the community, but it's also using empathy, kindness, understanding to put together something that is truly appealing. So Pride 365 work with partners, and we have meetings every month, not just with the DE&I team, but also the marketing, communications, and brand teams, to make sure that the partnership amplifies the work that they're doing, so it becomes a beacon. We kind of shine a light on the work that's being done internally and turn it around so it becomes a beacon that attracts great staff and more custom. And so these are just kind of two examples, different kinds of examples of ways we work with companies to really help them flourish.
Great example.
Yeah, no, thank you.
It's really interesting. I lived in San Francisco for 6 months in 2012 and did the open top bus tour. And the only fact I have retained from that bus tour is that there are more dogs than there are children in San Francisco, or there were in 2012, possibly because of the LGBTQ plus community that was in San Francisco at the time. But yeah, random fact to retain. We don't have any further questions coming through, so I'm going to take full advantage of being the chair of this session and jump back up to one of the ones that I asked early doors, and just some final thoughts from each of you, just on some really simple, quick win, practical things that our leaders can look at implementing in their own organizations to support Pride 365.
Do you want me to start, Adrian? I don't mind.
Go on then. Yeah, you go and I'll.
So, I mean, we've touched upon it several times. In fact, I'll answer that, but there's one thing I'd like to say first, because, and the fact I haven't said it until now is ludicrous, but Pride 365 are global partners of Interpride, and Interpride are the umbrella organization for the Pride movement worldwide. So when I say that Pride is important to us, believe me, it really is. I mean, we are their global partners. And the reason we came together to do this work is even the Pride organizers themselves realized that just people turning up and celebrating a Pride event in Pride Month or at any time isn't enough. There has to be stuff done all year round. So anyway, I would have kicked myself all night long had I not said that, so forgive me. But if I had to give one tip, it would be for there to be executive buy-in and for there to be an ally network. ERGs are great. I'm a huge proponent of them, but an ally network acts as the glue that brings people together. And this is something that we have real skill, Pride 365, have real skill and understanding of and are doing with partners all of the time.
Thank you.
I think for me, Catherine, I think it's around, yes, data is important, and I think it's how data is used. And to be able to get data to be used in a way where people feel comfortable in disclosing that data, you need to have a sense of belonging in that organization to be able to do that first. And for me, that belonging concept is something which needs to expand all those different employee resourcing groups and ally networks. And it's something whereby I think we are gradually on a bit of a journey of how those networks are set up. And possibly there needs to be a more global reach of those networks for people to understand, especially if you're working in a global organization, the different characteristics, the different cultural things, which are not all the same, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Western Europe, whether in South Africa, Australia, they're all very different. And I think there needs to be a bit more development in that area, particularly, which from a global perspective, we can do to enhance people's understandings first before you ask the questions about data. And for me, yes, data is a really good thing to have, but if data isn't used in the right way or used for the wrong reasons, then it actually isn't very helpful at all. So it's getting that buy-in, as Jack says as well, from senior leaders to understand why they're doing it before they just ask for data to do things like quotas, which you mentioned earlier on, which aren't a solution. They're just again, more a tick box exercise to say you've got to a certain point, oh, we've done this. That isn't enough. We actually understand how to get to that first. And that's, for me, is really critical element of this work.
Thanks, Adrian. Jacqui?
Forgive me for going into my own sort of world for a bit, but to me, one of the really important things is about what you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you smell, because I can always smell a rat any day of the week, but what you most of all feel. Because again, at the risk of sounding like a repeating record, but doing it only around certain days and certain events and making it about certain individuals, you've got to realize there are people out there who absolutely live this 365 days a year. So don't be afraid to have those conversations or bring it out there every single day, because that is so important that we go beyond that. There's been many an organization that I've been at, whether it be public sector down in Whitehall. If I walk around Whitehall in June, I'll see all the LGBT flags flying across every single government building, which is great to see. But why should it just be during June? Why can't it be beyond that? So creating those visible signs, creating those emotional attachments are so, so important to people, and building on those kind of things will be really, really important to allow people to give their all, because believe me, some of the most loyal people that you get will probably come from the LGBT community once they feel that they absolutely belong. And that's really important that we go into that space.
Catherine,
Thanks.
earlier there was a question that came up, which I think is really important, which was, what about smaller companies? And to that point is that Pride 365 work with, I mentioned some large ones just because people will know their names, but we work with many, many smaller companies, including micro businesses, and help them in similar ways. So again, inculcating a culture within which people are happy, one, and two, helping them put together a pledge that improves the lives of the community, both at work and in the wider society. And so we have an offering for companies of all sizes, be it micro to the very, very biggest in the world. So hopefully that answers Kathleen's question of earlier. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being so candid and insightful and genuine with your responses and feedback. I don't have any more questions in the chat box, so I would propose that we give everybody 5 whole minutes back to make that cup of tea before you start the rest of your afternoons. But before I do let you go, please join me in saying a huge thank you to Jack, Adrian and Jacqui for what has been a fantastic discussion this afternoon. I genuinely don't think an hour is long enough. I think we need to have you 3 coming and speaking to us regularly, because just the quality of that conversation was fantastic. So thank you both, or thank you all 3 of you for your time. I have shared various links in the chat over the course of the conversation, but if there is any further information that you would like us to send to attendees and those who weren't able to join us today, please just send that through and we'll make sure we send that out. But thank you all very much, and Adrian in particular, enjoy Eurovision. Have fun. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye for now. Bye.